But today and next week, I'm telling this, come let us adore him, Christmassy title, yay, right? This kind of goes with the theme, right? Come let us adore him. And we're talking about worship, okay? We're talking about worship, and I want to start in John chapter 4 and verse 23. And I have a lot of scripture, so if you don't get to them, write them down, study them throughout the week, listen to them, and I'm going to dive right in and just start reading them. John 4:23 and 24, he says, Jesus is saying, from here on, worshiping the Father will not be a matter of the right place, but with the right heart, okay? So everything that Jesus came to do, is switching the things that were works on the outside to have a real motive in the heart, to change the motive of the heart. So in other words, he didn't come to say, all right, good works are not good anymore. Don't do good works. No, he came to say, let the motivation of your heart, be the right one, because that's what matters, okay? So it says, worshiping the Father will not be a matter of the right place, but of the right heart. For God is a spirit, and he longs to have sincere worshipers, or true worshipers, who worship and adore him in the realm of the spirit and in truth. Okay? So he's saying, the true worshipers will worship me in spirit and in truth. Okay? Spirit and in truth. If he's saying that the true worshipers will worship him that way, that means that there's also not true worshipers. Right? And I wonder which one I am. Right? Which one am I? Okay? So I got to pay attention and be like, okay, it says that the true worshipers worship him in spirit and truth. Spirit first, because he is spirit, right? He is spirit, and he needs to be worshiped in spirit. So the first thing about that is that that's our encounter with him. That's our connection. Because worshiping is not singing songs. Worshiping isn't clapping your hands. Worshiping starts in the heart, right? And then it manifests through expressions, right? Through passionate expressions of worship. So it starts here, and then it comes out here. So in spirit is my ability to connect with him spiritually. Well, I tell you, we had some amazing worship times in Rocky Point, because, we needed to be fueled up to be able to give out, right? So we had Holy Ghost night, and it was amazing. There came a point where the presence of God was so strong in that little, patio where we were worshiping just in a circle, that everyone was just like paralyzed for like 15 minutes after the last note hit. And it was just like this silence, just complete silence. Everyone was just like, I don't want to. Nobody wanted to move. Like, it was just so powerful, and it's the presence of God. So what happened there, that was a spiritual connection. That is spirit. That is nothing you can see. If you take a picture of it, you would see nothing else that just people like that, right? But if you're there, like that is worshiping in spirit. There was a connection. So worshiping in spirit, I believe, is your ability to leave everything to the side and just focus your eyes on him and press in and see him face to face and have an encounter with him, right? That's his spirit, because he is spirit, and it cannot be done just by muttering things out of your mouth or clapping your hands or jumping up and down. It cannot be that way. It has to start here, and it's a spiritual connection. But then it goes and talks about being worshipers also in truth, okay? So we're going to talk about, those things, because I want to know, am I a true worshiper, or do I need to upgrade my worship? Like Hosea says, get my groove on with God. Like, do I come and it's just like the music part, or do I come and it's like, it's my connection time, it's my encounter time, right? Because at first it might not be. At first you might be like, what is this thing? I mean, everybody's singing, but some have their eyes closed, some have their hands up. I mean, maybe I need to pull out a lighter too, because that's what some people do. And you just don't understand it because you haven't yet worshiped in spirit, right? The reason why people in other countries can worship with a water bottle and just some clapping and some singing with no instruments, nothing like that, is because they know how to worship in spirit, because they've understood it's not about the music, right? The music is great. God gave us music. Let's make music beautiful and excellent. But if we had no music, could we still worship? I'd never thought about that. Well, today is the day, okay? So the spirit part is our encounter, our connection when you are adoring him, when you're just like in awe of him. When, we try to help out a little bit sometimes to tell you just everything that you're thankful for, just when you start thinking of thankfulness and adoration, that's the key to his presence. David said, come into his presence with thanksgiving. That's the door, and it goes deeper, and it goes deeper and deeper to a place where you're no longer thanking him for stuff. Now you're just standing in awe of him, of his glory, of his beauty. You're like, I see the angels around the throne singing, holy, holy, worthy, worthy. I'm there, Maybe not. Maybe you don't know, but that's okay because this is something we want to grow in, okay? So, and then when it talks about truth, I want to suggest this more about our lifestyle, about putting our action where our mouth is. Your praise will ever be on my lips. Really, when you walk out the building, somebody cuts you off. Is this praise on your lips? When your dog has an accident on the brand new rug, is his is his praise on your lips? Or what's on your lips at that moment, I remember when I learned to worship, when I was a teenager, I just met the Holy Spirit, and you just you grow in this stuff, you learn this stuff, and I was at these youth conferences with 1,500 youth, and this is all new for us, right? Because we were in the Baptist church, we love the Baptists, but they didn't dance, they didn't clap, they didn't sing out loud, it was just kind of limited, You didn't clap after a song, because no. And it was just, it's different, okay? And so we're here in this new environment and we're learning how to worship, and there's all these youth, and the music starts and it looks like the room's about to fall because everyone's just dancing, and I'm like, that looks so fun and so awesome. But man, I don't know. And it took me a few months to be like, all right, I want to do it, but what are they going to say about me? What if I look weird, And I'm thinking I'm going to look weird. Somebody told me once, I love how you dance. You're like a pogo stick. I'm like, thanks. That just helps me out a lot, Now I know. But I'm telling you, the freedom that I experienced when I stopped taking myself so seriously, and you're like, well, where's that in the Bible? Because maybe that's you, but that's not me. Well, let's look. Let's go to 2 Samuel chapter 6. 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 14, because I wanted to dance, but I couldn't get over myself. So it took a while to stop taking myself too seriously and stop thinking about myself so much. Insecurity, that's what I felt. But insecurity is when you look inside for security. When you look in for security, it's insecurity. Oh, because you have to look there for security. And when you look there for security, then you're all good. You feel secure. So I know many of you are secret, passionate worshipers and dancers. Inside, you're like, I want to, but you couldn't worship freely because maybe you're in the way, okay? So David, King David was referred to as God. God called him, a man after God's own heart, after his heart, right? And so he's a great example in Old Testament, great example of worship, okay? And I'm telling you, he was a manly man. I mean, if there was hunting, he was a hunter, If there was anything tough, rough, manly going on, King David would beat us all to it, He was a warrior, right? And he knew how to worship God. 2 Samuel 6:14, I'm gonna read, it says, and David danced before the Lord with all his might, wearing a priestly garment. One thing real quick. First of all, that dance is the word to whirl. So he was actually just dancing, like twirling and twirling and twirling and twirling. You know, I don't know how he didn't get dizzy. Maybe he got dizzy and fell a few times. Who knows? But he was dancing and whirling with all his might, with all his strength, like violently before the Lord. You know, there's something that only comes from the heart. You can't be like, all right, let's do that dance. And no, it has to come from the heart, because it's so much passion inside. Here's what I tell people. It's like when your passion for God is the one driving, when your heart's the one driving your worship, and you just start thinking about him, you know, and it causes you to sing first, and then it causes you to clap your hands, and it causes you to raise your hand, and it's causing you to express more of what's in here. Somebody told us once, like, all right, we want you all guys to now jump up and down while you're going to worship. And I say, well, hold on, that doesn't work that way. You can't just turn it on and off. You know, that's called performance, you know. But if we understand that it comes from a passion, from a thankful heart, from a worshiping heart, you know, then it's different. Then you know it's like you have to dance because you're about to explode. That's what it's like, right? It's kind of like when you're watching your favorite team and they're about to score and you're at the edge of your chair and then they score. You explode, right? Because there's a passion inside that manifests through your body and you just go, yeah, and you go crazy, right? So it's the same thing. It starts in the heart, and it starts with a passion, you know. That's why you have to come in here and you have to cast your cares onto him so that you're not all busy up in your mind and like, oh, did I left the stove on? And oh my gosh, I have to race out of here after, as soon as he's done, you know, with all his talking, I have to race out and go eat, and I have to go pick up the dog from the groomer. And like, you have to fix your eyes on him and start meditating on thankfulness, you know, start meditating on things so that you can produce from inside, you can let that passion just burst out in praise and worship. Okay? And remember, you can never outgive God. So when you bring worship to him, the one that is mostly blessed and touched is you. It's always us. Okay? So then King David said he danced before the Lord with all his might. And so David and all the people of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouts of joy and the blowing of ram's horns. But as the ark of the Lord entered the city of David, Michal, the daughter of Saul, looked down from her window. When she saw the king leaping and dancing before the Lord, she was filled with contempt for him. So she despised him. She was embarrassed for him. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the special tent David had prepared for it. And David sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings to the Lord. When he had finished his sacrifices, David blessed the people in the name of the Lord of heaven's army. Then we're going to verse 18, I believe. It says, when David returned home to bless his own family, Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet him. She said in disgust, how distinguished the king of Israel looked today, shamelessly exposing himself to the servant girls like any vulgar person might do. David retorted to Michal, I was dancing before the Lord. So number one, his audience was one person. It was the Lord. Not his wife, not the people of Israel, not even the servant girls. His audience was the audience of one. So in order to be able to worship freely, we need to remember our audience is him. It's just for him, you know. Yes, we have people around, but it's just for him, you know. And then it says, I was dancing before the Lord who chose me above your father and all his family. He appointed me as the leader of Israel. You know, I know this seems like a jab comment from David to tell her, like, you know, God chose me before your father, like, so just to remind you. No, but there's an interesting thing to remember there besides the jab. It's that Saul lived for an audience of the people. He was a people pleaser. He looked for the approval of the people, and he feared man instead of fearing God. David lived for an audience of one, and Saul got removed. David was set in his throne and was given a promise that the Messiah would come from his lineage, right? So there's a big difference when we live for the approval of others. You know, when our worship becomes about the approval of others instead of, you know, for him, you know, just to love on him. So it says, so I celebrated before the Lord, yes, and check this out, and I am willing to look even more foolish than this, even to be humiliated in my own eyes, but those servant girls you mentioned will indeed think I am distinguished. Even more undignified, you know? That's the cost of dignity right there. I don't care if I look like a pogo stick. When I'm dancing before the Lord, I was just dancing before him. At a wedding, man, I can't move, Like when the dance is happening, I'm not that guy. Jose is, where is he? But I'm not. I don't have the moves. And, the best thing I could do is just jump up and down like a pogo stick, but it's just not my thing, But when it's before the Lord, it's completely different because I don't care. I really feel like we need to adopt that David's heart right there. It's like even more undignified than this because it's for him. It's like this is a part that is my worship is for him. And if I start walking like Saul, and I start thinking, well, what's she going to think? What's she going to think? What's she going to think? And I'm not saying you all have to dance. I'm not saying you all have to whirl. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, you need to allow that passion to boil and explode and express itself in a greater, deeper way every time, to grow and be a worshiper in spirit and in truth. That you are allowing yourself, that you're free. Like, if as free as you get is just to raise your hands and shout out, then that is it, Are you with me? Okay. So, even more undignified than this, right? Because this is for the Lord, okay? It's my offering of worship. It costed him his dignity before his wife, and it cost me my dignity, and it's okay if it costs you your dignity. Maybe you can't sing, maybe you're tone deaf. It doesn't matter. That's why the speakers are loud anyways. It doesn't matter, right? Because our worship is not about the songs. That's just an expression that we use. Different new songs, it's just new expressions that we get to connect with and say like, oh, that's an awesome one. Every time I see a beautiful moon, I tell my wife, I dedicate that to you. I didn't write it. I didn't paint it, But I'm still taking it and saying, hey, that one's for you, David, a true worshiper, was generous without issue. 1 Chronicles 29, 3-9, very interesting because it was in spirit and in truth with a lifestyle. And it says, and now, 1 Chronicles 29, 3, and now because of my devotion to the temple of my God, or to the house of God, this is what David's saying. Because of my devotion to the temple of my God, I am giving all of my own private treasures and gold and silver to help in the construction. Just so you know, we're not taking up an offering for construction of a church, okay? It says, this is in addition to the building materials I have already collected for this temple. I'm donating more than 112 tons of gold from Ophir and 262 tons of refined silver. And you can read the rest of this. And, people calculate that King David's offering was in the millions or hundreds of millions of dollars equals to today, for what he gave to the house of the Lord. But I love that it says, it's because of my devotion to God's house. His devotion, his love, his honor to the house of God. See, it wasn't because it was in any law. It wasn't because anybody told him he had to. It wasn't because anybody coerced him into. It was because of what? His devotion to the house of God. His devotion to God. His love for God. So here's a worshiper in spirit and in truth. And truth has translated his worship into action, right? He didn't think it twice. He knew where everything had come from anyways, right? 2 Samuel 24, what happens there is David buys land to build an altar for God. It says, but the King David replied to Araunah, no, I insist on buying it. Check this out. This is the heart of King David, okay? A man after God's own heart. It says, I will not present burnt offerings to the Lord my God that have cost me nothing. So David paid him 50 pieces of silver for the threshing floor and the oxen. Okay, what happened here is this guy said, oh, King David, no, you can have this piece of land so you can build an altar so you can, offer, the burnt offerings. Like, you can have it. And King David's like, nope, I will not offer God anything that doesn't cost me. I was like, wow. Would I have done that? Right? Would I have done that, or would I have been like, all right, great, thanks. And I'm just showing you, here's the standard of a man who God loved very much. And he was not a perfect man. We all know King David, man, he had big faults. Adultery and murder. Even with that, God calls him a man after his own heart, right? A man who knew how to repent. A man who knew how to turn around things. Like Saul did not kill anyone or commit adultery. Saul didn't do that. But his heart wasn't for God like David's was. David was a true worshiper, spirit and truth. His actions followed his heart. His actions followed what he said. Right? And I wonder, would I have said, no, let me pay you for it because I will not give God anything that didn't cost me? Like, he knew worship. Worship translated to every part of his life. So we worship here. Let's say that you can connect with God and you know how to connect with God here and you can worship him in spirit. But how about out there? When you're outside of here, is your life still worshiping him in truth with your lifestyle? And again, I'm not talking about living a perfect life that you have to just watch your every move. I'm not saying that at all, But does our worship follow in every area of our life? See, there is a tension in worshiping with a cost. There's a tension. I was talking to the worship leaders this last week, and I was telling them there's something powerful about our worship here on earth that we're not going to have anything like it when we go to heaven. Because when you go to heaven, you will not have the tension of the worries of life and the storms that you go through and the losses and the mourning and the trials that you're going through. When you are in heaven, we will worship, but it will be totally different. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance, an opportunity that you have to worship God along with the worries of life, with the pain, along with the suffering, along with, hey, I'm not saying suffering's from God, not at all, but it happens. We all go through stuff, right? We all go through things in different ways and different levels. And you will never have another opportunity to worship the Lord like you have today, like you have tomorrow. So will you worship him in the midst of everything? Listen, there is a very twisted message out there that has said before, like, you have to worship God and suffer because that makes you look holier. That's not right. He does not want us to suffer, and it's not his plan for us to suffer because we are not the heroes. He is the hero. Okay? But there is a beautiful fragrance of an offering of worship that is given by his lovers, even when you're going in the midst of things and trials that life just brings. Are you with me? There's a big difference there. Because he doesn't send it, but it happens. And when it's happening, will you still worship? Because that worship has a fragrance and has a fingerprint that you can never replicate. Because you could sing, Good, Good Father, or you could sing, my praise, your praise will ever be on my lips on a day when your life is perfect, and you can sing the same song when you're going through hell. And it's going to be a total different song because it has the fingerprint of your soul and your life and what's going on in that moment. Are you with me? When you're missing out opportunities of worship every day that are songs that might have the same words but don't have the same flavor. When you're going through the struggles in life or your kids or your marriage and stuff, will you still worship the Lord in the midst of that? Right? You will never have another chance to worship God as you do when you were fighting this or when you were fighting that. And again, it's not to make you the hero. You're not the hero. You're offering a worship offering to the Lord. You understand? Worship is so much deeper and different than sometimes, the world has made us think or religion has tried to sell us. So that's a great example from the Old Testament. See, in heaven, you cannot worship through the tears and the pain because there will be none. You're not going to have that chance. It's going to be different. It's going to be glorious and amazing. But you're not going to have that. In heaven, you cannot give an offering like you can here because they'll be paving the streets with gold. Like you can't, like in heaven you can be like, oh, look how generous I am. I'm giving this offering. It's like, yeah, just put it right there. We have a pothole. Fill it up. It's like, it's going to be different, Matthew 2:10. Let's go to the New Testament and let's read this. Matthew 2:10 through 11. I'm going to read out of the Passion Translation. It says, and when they saw the star, oh, come let us adore him. They were so ecstatic that they shouted and celebrated with unrestrained joy. That sounds to me like when the children of Israel were bringing the Ark of the Covenant to the city of David. They were celebrated and they shouted with unrestrained joy. When they came into the house and saw the young child with Mary, his mother, they were overcome. Okay, keep in mind, young child with mom. Not a church, not a ministry. It was Jesus. Okay? It was Jesus. They were overcome. Falling to the ground at his feet, they worshiped him. Then they opened their treasure boxes full of gifts and presented him with gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They worshiped and they brought offerings. See, when I tell you like your giving is part of your worship, I'm not just making that up, right? It is so together. It is so the same thing. It comes together. King David had the same heart. He worshiped, he expressed it in the dance, and he put his money where his mouth was. It was his spirit, but it was in truth. The wise men came to worship, and they didn't come to worship empty-handed. They came and they bowed low to the ground, and then they opened up their boxes and they offered their treasures to the baby boy. But who is the baby boy? Because you cannot worship without a revelation that you're giving to Jesus. Right? They weren't like, oh, I think we brought too much gold, man. You know what? Yeah, let's just give them a few coins. They'll be all right. Like they don't have a need for that right now. Why didn't they hold back by what they saw? Because they had a revelation of the King they were coming to worship. They had a revelation they were giving to Jesus. Hebrews 13:10. You can read it at home, 10 through 16. It talks about how we know, because, see, a lot of people get caught up with like, oh, sacrifice. We're not supposed to sacrifice anything anymore. Hold up. We're not supposed to sacrifice for our sins because we don't have to. Jesus was the ultimate sacrifice. We don't need to sacrifice for approval or to calm his wrath or his anger because it's been all done. It's been appeased. But we still bring sacrificial offering of worship. Do we? Well, in Hebrews 13:10, it talks about we no longer offer sin sacrifices of blood, but instead sacrifices of praise. Sacrifices of praise. True worship means more than just love. It means to be prostrate on the ground and submit to his will. It's one of the definitions of worship. It's to bow low before him in submission to him. We do this even with our hands, right? We lift up our hands not because it's part of the choreography, right? Like lifting up your hands is a sign of surrender. Kind of like when the police comes and they go, hands up. Except this is a voluntary surrender, right? You lift your hands because you're saying, I surrender to you, right? I trust you. I give you my worship, and I submit. I want to know your will. I want to know your plan. So here's my life, open and vulnerable, exposed. Let's start here. Maybe like here. Maybe here. I don't know where you go, But it's a sign of surrender. It's a sign of worship. It's a sign of saying, so how hypocritical it would be to come and worship, say, I surrender my life to you, and then go out there and do nothing of what he tells us to do. Right? That's not worship in truth. Anybody learning anything good this morning? I hope, right? Okay. So true worship means a lot more than just love. It means also the submission of my own life to say, I choose you, your life, what you have for me. Which, let me tell you, it's always better. But today I'm not trying to bring you a message that says, listen, you're always going to reap more than he gives you, and he always outgives you. Like, can we just not dangle that carrot in front for a moment and give out of honor and out of worship, right? Out of a revelation that we're giving to Jesus. Okay, here's the last scripture. Amen. That's right. Mark 14. Let's go to Mark chapter 14, and we're going to read verse 3 through 9. Okay. Here's a New Testament example of incredible, amazing worship. And in the form of what? Of a gift. Like, there was no songs here. I don't even know if the three kings or the wise men, the wise men, I don't even know if the wise men sang, Didn't even say they were musicians. They came to worship, but they brought no songs. What did they bring? Treasure. So Mark 14 and verse 3. Now you can find this story in Matthew 26 and in John 12, okay? Same story in all three of the Gospels. There's one in Luke that is not the same, okay? I just want to point that out. So it says, verse 3 through 9. This is awesome. It says, now Jesus was in Bethany in the home of Simon, a man Jesus had healed of leprosy. And as he was reclining at the table, a woman came into the house. This is identified as Mary of Bethany, okay? Lazarus and Martha's sister. And holding an alabaster flask. It was filled with the highest quality of fragrant and expensive oil. Okay, now this oil, if you don't know, it was equated to a 1 year's salary. Okay, that's what the Bible tells us. That was the value of this oil that she brought. 1 year's salary. Okay, so whatever, 40,000, 50,000, 60,000, whatever the normal. That's for that time it was. And it says, she walked right up to Jesus, and with a gesture of extreme devotion. Wow, again, a gesture of extreme devotion or honor or worship. She broke the flask and poured out the precious oil over his head. Okay? But some were highly indignant when they saw this. And, in the Gospel of John, you can see specifically one of those was Judas. And they complained to one another, saying, what a total waste. What a total waste. It could have been sold for a great sum, and the money could have benefited the poor. So they scolded her harshly. And Jesus said to them, leave her alone. I really wonder which one would I have been? Would I have been like, what's that lady doing? Man, do you know what is she doing? Can somebody go pick some of that up, please? You know what we could do with that? I wonder which one I would have been. And she's pouring the oil on Jesus. $40,000, like just gone. Burnt offering. Willingly. Because of what again? It says because of her devotion, right? And the other version says because of her love, her honor, because of honor. It was an offering of honor. And it says, Jesus said to them, Leave her alone. Why are you so critical of this woman? She has honored me with this beautiful act of kindness. Okay, honored. That was an act of honor and worship to him. For you will always have the poor, whom you can help whenever you want, but you will not always have me. When she poured out the fragrant oil over me, she was preparing my body in advance for burial. She has done all that she could do to honor me. I promise you that as this wonderful gospel all right, check this out. When Jesus says, like, I promise you, like I see him saying, like, I promise you that as this wonderful gospel spreads through the whole world, the story of her lavish devotion to me will be mentioned in memory of her. Wow. Like, that caught us all off guard, right? We were all thinking, like, all we could do with that. And here Jesus telling us, you have no idea how incredibly powerful her offering, her worship was to me because of her heart. See, we don't always have to see where our offering is going to go to. As a matter of fact, do we ever? Because if we're giving to Jesus, you need a revelation. See? Because if you're giving to Jesus, like this woman was, it's like, there you go. Like, how can I honor you? That was an offering of honor to him, of worship to him. It's like if I open up a case with $100 bills, $40,000, and I light it up in fire. I mean, we would go, like, what a waste! Right? And that's exactly what she did. Hold on, I'm not telling you to light up cash. Pastor Ben, that's a weird church you're running. But how many times we need to have something attached to us in order to be able to justify what we're giving instead of realizing that we're just giving to Jesus because we honor him. It's an offering of honor to the King. And that's all I need. Well, is it 10% or 20% or 15% or 7%? Which percentage is it? I don't know, but I'll tell you, that was 100. So, worshipers in spirit and in truth. Oh, come, let us adore him, And how do we come to him? Because again, this is not the message where I tell you, you cannot outgive God, and that's also your seed, and you will reap abundantly, because that's besides the point. If you don't already know how generous of a God he is, if you don't already know his character and nature, that he wants to get more to you, then that's a different teaching for another day, okay? But what we're talking about here is how being worshipers in spirit and in truth is so linked to a generosity and to giving and to a heart that says, I'm giving to Jesus, right? Because of revelation, because he must be honored by me. My life must honor him in more than just a song and more than just love, but and sacrificial giving. Now, I'm not telling you to give your money rent money, As a matter of fact, in the Old Testament, one of the scriptures we read, when King David gave and then all his men gave, it says they gave willingly, voluntarily and willingly, which clearly says there was no coercion. So if you've ever been manipulated or coerced into giving, I am sorry. That shouldn't have happened, and that wasn't right. But what we do need to know is that there is something powerful about giving something that cost us. And I was thinking, we've been given, for many years before me and Carrie even got married, we already happened to give the same percentage above, our tithes and everything. But I just, so it's almost become normal, to a point. And I said, honey, is it costing us? We're used to it. We've been doing it for over 20 years because we did it when we were single, right? And thank God we were on the same page there. It's like, how much you give? How much you give? Okay, good, But I asked her, I said, is it costing us? And I said, what is it costing us, right? And as we thought about it, I'm like, sometimes it turns into normal because you kind of just fall into the habit, so we like to increase even if it's a little bit once a year. But I said, it is costing us because for what we give, I don't know. Maybe to you is the cost of some other commodity or some other comfort thing or some subscription or something else. I don't know. For me, I told Kara, I said, well, to us, I know. I think that would be a brand new luxury car for me, I guess. A payment, So yes, we're giving something. It's costing us something, right? It's instead of, and that's part of my worship to the Lord. Now, what that is to you, I don't know. That's between you and God. But will you give the Lord something that costs you or something that just doesn't affect you, that doesn't, change anything of your comfort life or whatever, Like, Pastor, that was harsh. Well, truth sometimes does that. But see, this is a check for you. This is between you and God. Are you a worshiper in spirit and in truth? Is it just singing songs, or do you actually know how to connect with Him? And is your lifestyle following that? Because the lifestyle of a worshiper is also a very generous person, right? It's a person that has devotion and love for the house of God, for the temple of God, that moves them instead to do that, right? But today I'm not going to talk to you about the benefits of giving or any of that stuff. That's not it. Today it's only one thing. Are you worshiping Jesus with what you're giving, and is it costing you anything? And if not, maybe it's something you need to go home, pray about, talk to your spouse, and get an agreement and get in unity and be like, I never thought about it that way, And let me tell you something. If you don't agree with this message, that's totally okay. This is not a place of rules. We're just called to preach truth, and then you're supposed to do with that whatever God tells you to do with that. Right? So I wanted to save this time to the end so that you could have some time to ask yourself that question. Be like, Lord, or maybe something you need to prepare, you're bringing to Jesus, me and my family like to bring a little extra something to the Lord on Christmas Day, right? And maybe that's what it is for you. I don't know what it is for you, and I cannot tell you what it is for you. Only you would know what means cost to you and what is just, leftovers or the normal or whatever. But King David, a true worshiper, and Mary, one that Jesus pointed out her worship and said, this will be remembered for eternity. This is a true gift of honor, true worship, honorable worship, right? That's how it was. So we're just left to looking at those examples and looking at our lives saying, all right, I got to step it up in my worship, right? Am I a true worshiper? I want to be a true worshiper, or I need to grow in that area, or I need to get my worship on, like Jose says, right?